So it's been a while since I made an Apex Legends video. I believe my last one was my Apex Legends tier list, which was all the way back in Season 6. So, with me getting back into Apex, I thought I'd make a few more Apex videos. I don't know how consistent the content's going to be. It will probably remain kind of a bit inconsistent and a bit all over the place. I am hoping to get out some more videos, and if you want to comment some video ideas down below, that would be very helpful. So, considering I've never done one of these before, I'm going to do an Apex Legends weapons tier list. So I'm going to be ranking all the weapons from F tier all the way up to S tier. I will be ranking the care package weapons, as I believe that all of them are S tier. And this is my weapons tier list as of Season 11 Escape. So let's start. So the first tier is F tier. There is only one gun here, it's the P2020. It will not be F tier next season as hammer points have been confirmed to be returning. But right now, the P2020 is just not that powerful. It doesn't really fill me with confidence. If I get a P2020 off drop, I'm filled with dread at the prospect of having to fight someone. It is not a good gun. It really needs a buff, and hopefully hammer points will be able to push it up. Up next, we have D tier, and the only weapon D tier is the Mozambique. It is slightly better than the P2020. It has 6 shots, does a decent amount of damage, and can be somewhat accurate. And it is not the worst gun to have off drop, although I would much rather have something from C or B tier off drop. So first up in C tier, bottom, I've got the Havoc Rifle. Now, the Havoc Rifle with the turbocharger is an A/S tier weapon. Without it, it takes ages to charge up, and it's just completely useless in close range encounters. If you shoot from mid or long range, it's a decent weapon, but then you'll have bullet drop off. And in my opinion, the Havoc sits comfortably at the bottom of C tier. And next up in C tier, we have the Charge Rifle. Now, when the Charge Rifle came out in Season 3, it was very overpowered. Since then, it has had substantial nerfs, which is good, and it can still be a thorn in your side, and it is useful in situations. But it just lacks the overall capability to be a viable gun. Next up in C tier is the Longbow. The Longbow is, aside from the Charge Rifle, my least favourite sniper, and I consider the Charge Rifle an energy rifle anyway. The Longbow is just not as good and is outclassed by the Sentinel. Next up in C tier, controversially, is the Triple Take. Now, the Triple Take was very good when it came back to the floor, but since then it has received nerfs, and I just do not think it is as powerful as it could be. I think it could do with a slight buff to really push it up. Next up in C tier is the 30-30 repeater. Now, the repeater is quite an interesting gun, because when it came out, as opposed to other people, I thought it was quite a powerful gun, essentially like a DMR from Warzone. But since then, I haven't really seen the same thing from it. I've seen the light, and I've said that the 30-30 repeater is a bang average weapon that needs buffs to push it up. Next up in C tier, we have the L-Star. Now, I don't use a lot of the L-Star, but I hear it has received a lot of competent buffs, particularly in Season 9 and 10. But I also believe it will receive some nerfs to compensate for it being this good, and this has pushed it back down to C tier. At the top of C tier, we have the Bocek Compound Bow, which is arguably my least favourite gun in the whole game, aside from the P2020. The Bocek has the worst ammo type in the game, as almost no one runs arrows and it's really difficult to find. And yes, it has a couple of hop-ups, which do make it more effective, but I still don't think it's that powerful, since it has received nerfs since its shipping in Season 9. It is extremely frustrating to fight against, and is a more effective long-range weapon than the Charge Rifle. Moving up into B tier, and at the bottom of B tier is my favourite non-care package sniper, the Sentinel. The Sentinel is a good weapon, and it's even better when you charge up to have Disruptor with the shield set. But it's just not that powerful, and it needs another buff to push it into A tier. Next up is the EVA 8. The EVA 8 is a decent shotgun and a good weapon to have off drop to carry into the mid game. You really do not want to be carrying this weapon to late game. The EVA 8 can do some damage, and it's an automatic shotgun, meaning it has the biggest mag size out of all the shotguns, and has more room for new players to grow, but I'm still not that big of a fan of it. Next up in B tier is the Rampage. Now the Rampage was very powerful when it launched. Since then it has received nerfs, and I've never been a fan of the Rampage. Now the Rampage with a Thermite is probably high A or low S tier, but without a Thermite it sits comfortably in the middle of B tier. I was honestly thinking they would push the Rampage into the care package next season and move the Spitfire out, but that change has not come to fruition. I mean, now only the Volt will switch into the Alternator. Next up in B tier is the Prowler. Now the Prowler in old days with Select Fire was very powerful. Now with Burst it's still a good weapon, but it is not as strong as it used to be, considering it has received substantial nerfs since its return to the ground. The Prowler is a good weapon to have off drop and carry into the mid game, and with an extended mag you can definitely do some damage with it, but it's not the best weapon in the game by far and it requires a buff. Next up is quite controversially the RE45. The RE45 is one of my favourite guns and in my opinion the most underrated gun in Apex. Especially with an extended mag it can absolutely shred as it has a high DPS. However, it requires a buff, and I believe the introduction of hammer point rounds to it in Season 12 will be that buff but can push it into A tier. Next up is the Hemlock. The Hemlock is a burst rifle and it is a good gun, and it's definitely something that is viable off drop and potentially carryable into the late game. However, I think it might require just a small buff to push it up into A tier, which is the perfect range for where all guns should be. Next up, and the final gun in B tier, is the Devotion. The Devotion with Turbocharger is arguably one of the best guns in the game, if not the best. Without the Turbocharger, it takes a while to charge up. It isn't that powerful. However, it is still a very viable gun, and one that should not be overlooked. The Devotion does not need buffs, as that would push it into the A tier, as that would make it way too powerful. So it should stay as it is. Moving into A tier, at the bottom of A tier is the Flatlock. The Flatline is a very competent gun. It's definitely something you can carry throughout the whole game, and if you get a Flatline off drop, it's good as you can use it in close, mid or even long range with its single fire. Next up in the A tier is the Wingman. The Wingman is a very good gun. It's a skill based gun, but if you hit your shots you can do a lot of damage with it. It can be inconsistent and frustrating at times, but it's a great gun and a very balanced gun at that. Next up in A tier is the Mastiff Chakra. Mastiff was all the rave in the first half of Season 8, and it received a nerf in the Chaos Fury event, but it is still a very powerful gun and it's at the right stage. I hope it doesn't receive any more buffs or nerfs because I believe it is at the perfect stage, and with its 6 shots it can definitely pack a punch. Next up is the Peacekeeper. The Peacekeeper was my favourite gun in the game for a long time, before it got created in Season 5, and even when it became a created weapon, it was still very good. It returned to the floor in Season 9 and of course received nerfs. It has received slight buffs since then to compensate for a slight over-nerfing. I think it's in a good spot. If you hit your shots, the Peacekeeper is the best shotgun in the game. Next up in A tier is the R301. The R301 is just the perfect weapon. It can do long, short or medium range. It has a decent clip size, it has the easiest ammo to find in the game, and it is just the perfect weapon for the game. It really is Apex's bread and butter. Up next is the R99. The R99 is also a fantastic weapon, has the easiest ammo to find, and it's just a great all-round SMG. I think it's in a great spot right now and doesn't need any buffs or nerfs, because even though it can be a bit overpowered, loads of people carry around an R9. Just above the R9 in A tier is the Volt. The Volt is going into the care package next season in place of the Alternator, and this is an interesting change, since I believe the Volt is the easiest to use out of the SMGs on the floor, although I think the Alternator will become that once it comes out of the care package. The Volt uses energy ammo, which can be hard to find, but it does have slightly more damage than the R9, and this probably is a bit easier to control. And at the top of A tier is the G7 Scout. The G7 Scout, despite being a care package weapon, is not an S tier. I believe it could do with a little buff, and it really doesn't feel like a care package weapon. So I believe they should bring it out of the care package and put it on the floor. And then in S tier, at the bottom, is the Spitfire. The Spitfire is the best LMG in the game, and was even before it got created. It is a fantastic gun, and it's just all round brilliant, and I don't see why it should come out of the crate anytime soon. Next up in S tier is the Alternator. The Alternator with Disrupt rounds is a fantastic gun, and that's what I can say about it really. If you've seen clips from Season 2, you'll see how it was with the Disrupt, but on the ground, it's even more crazy. So yeah, enjoy the Alternator Disrupt like last season, and there'll be no Disruptors next season. And at the top of S tier, the best gun in the game, there's always been the best gun in the game, is the Prowler. The Prowler is the perfect care package weapon, has the perfect amount of ammo, so it can do incredible damage, and it's just a fantastic sniper. So there you have it, that's my Apex Legends weapon for Escape. I'll probably be doing one in 2 or 3 seasons, and if you want to see some more Apex videos, or just videos in general, comment down below your ideas, because sometimes I'll run out of ideas.